Hi, everyone. This is Jen from Genia Metamorphosis Mentoring. And today I have a beautiful guest, Manuela Pauer. She is a fellow Aquarius coach. I would love to introduce you with so much joy because that's her passion in career coaching, leading people to create happiness. And happiness and authenticity, they are so big of a subject, but we are here to explore how we're going to link these two together. So beautiful women, are you ready?
I am. Thank you so much, Jen. Thank you for having me.
Okay. Where do we start? So number one, authenticity. I'm going to use the word authenticity again because this is the genre that we're exploring into. And as you know, we are all trying to find like who the heck we are. Are you true to who you are? And these are just such a big, it's not like being a new agey type of concept, but for sure, it's an ultimate goal that so many of us we're exploring in this personal development. We want to somewhat get there, but then there are a lot of obstacles, a lot of ups and downs that we have to travel through. So here, peeling the onion layers with you, Manuela, I'd love to have you share more about your personal journey of how you were being guided to do what you do today as a happiness coach, well, career coaching, okay? Because I've known you for quite a while and I know your unique cultural ethnicity in your family background. And I'm just like curious, like how does this part of your childhood affect the way you look this value about happiness? Like, do your parents share the happiness genes to you, or how does it go? Because I weren't born with happiness genes for sure. So I'd love to know more about that.
Sure, absolutely. There's so many different pieces in there. You mentioned happiness, for example, and it's a subject I've been fascinated by and have been studying for over a decade now. And luckily, there has been a lot of research around the topic that has been so helpful, but it's almost like there's too much research. We don't even know what to focus on. And you mentioned, having the happiness gene or being, born with it, or is your family influencing it? About 50%, I think, of happiness they're showing is actually based on genes. So the good news is that there's still another 50% that we can affect, because obviously we cannot change the genes that we have. But yes, some people are born just happier than other people. So you're asking about my background, and just so everyone knows, since you mentioned my culturally diverse background, my father is Austrian, my mother's Japanese, and I was born in Germany. So that's sort of the background. And I grew up really not being very happy. So the interesting part is I think that sometimes as children, we are being our authentic selves. And then that authenticity can be nurtured, so they continue to be authentic and true to who we are, or it can get squashed based on our environment, society, parenting, etc. And I think in my case, it definitely got squashed. So I
about that, definitely
yes,
curious.
Sure. So I remember very clearly. So my grandmother on my father's side lived in Austria, in Vienna. And since I was in Germany, I used to visit her quite often. And I still have this very distinct memory of visiting her. And one time during this visit, she had some old mattresses. And she encouraged me. She said, I have these old mattresses. You are allowed to jump on them and just, have fun, play with them. And I was so excited. I was this little girl. And I, thought, this is perfect. I'm just going to give a dance performance on these mattresses. And I had no idea. I've never taken a dance class in my life. I was probably just jumping around wildly. But in my mind, I was giving this grandiose, beautiful performance to my grandma, who was very excited and was clapping and really encouraged me. And I felt free. I think I was really being my authentic self in that moment.
How old were you at the time?
I think I was around 6. I don't know the exact age, but somewhere around that age. And that, I think that was an age when I still could be my authentic self with my grandmother, who was encouraging it. Mm-hmm. Now, a contrasting memory was when I visited my grandparents on my mother's side in Japan. And my grandfather took me to visit some friends of his, elderly couple, and, traditional Japanese household, and went over, and, the adults are all talking, and there are no other kids, so I'm kind of bored. Mm-hmm. And there were all these pieces of string lying around, and the person who we're visiting, she said, oh, I could, play with the strings. So I just thought, okay, strings, what can I do? And I decided to use it as a jump rope. And so I excitedly started to jump rope on the tatami mats with a piece of string. And again, the person seemed, very encouraging and smiling. And then she offered me a yogurt drink. I don't know if you know the little Yakuruto.
Yes. I remember those.
Yes, and I love those drinks, and they didn't have it in Germany, right? So here's my chance. She's offering my favorite drink. And so I excitedly said yes. And when I finished, she offered me another one. And I was so excited, I accepted, until my grandfather said, that's enough, you cannot have any more. And when we came home to his house, he talked to my mother, and my mother came to me and she said, what did you do? Apparently, my grandfather had told her that he had never been so embarrassed in his entire life. I had gone and I was playing around, jumping around on a tatami mat with a piece of string rather than sitting quietly as I was supposed to do. And I said yes when someone offered me something, when clearly in Japanese culture, you have to say no politely at least several times when someone offers you something. And I think that was one of the moments when my authentic self got squashed and shut down. Oh. Because what I was naturally doing, the joy I was feeling and the things I enjoyed and loved that I was expressing were not right. They embarrassed people who I cared about. And I think that sort of illustrates, right, how the cultural impact.
And it's so confusing for you to just kind of navigate because they're so different. One encourages you to just have fun and just embrace that childlike innocence, right? And another part of that Japanese culture experience was no, you need to do this or else you're not a good girl,
Exactly.
And how did you navigate with the confusion of, the different parenting style from both your father's side and your mother's side?
Well, since I grew up with my mother, and my mother did the majority of parenting, and she held on to a very traditional Japanese style. Mm-hmm. My parenting was really influenced by that, I think. And a lot of the rules were around how do you behave in Japanese culture, mm-hmm. and how are you polite? How do you tone down everything? Even though I grew up in Germany, but again, everything was colored by my mom. So I think a lot of the things that I did, I had to be careful that it would match up with Japanese culture.
Right.
And you're right, it was confusing because sometimes it was the opposite. I would implement something that, I'd learned through Japanese culture. And then my mom would say, why are you doing that? Right. That's not being smart. So yes, there was a lot of confusion. I had no idea. I didn't understand, right, that there were cultural differences and, why there were different rules.
Okay, I find this super fascinating then. So as you are just kind of learning to just swimming in the confusion sea, right? Trying to understand how you should behave as appropriate. Let's just fast forward a little bit to the change that you were making when you moved to the States from Germany, because I know you have that part you want to probably share a little bit more, because that requires courage. Any change that requires courage. And because before you become who you are today, okay, I am a career happiness coach, you still have to go through those ups and downs, don't you?
Yes, although in this case, because I moved with my parents, it was less of a move that I had to do all by myself. I had always had the dream of coming to the United States. So I was very intent on somehow finding a way. I was even looking into exchange student programs and finding some way to come to the US. Mm-hmm. And then one day my father came home and informed us that he had been transferred and the whole family would be moving to Los Angeles. And so that's how I came to LA. And I know that's part of your experience as well, that we share. And we moved. And I was actually excited to a certain extent, because that was part of my dream, right? I didn't need to now find a way to come here on my own. My family was moving, which was great. Now, Los Angeles, as you know, has a big Asian population. Mm-hmm. And because many people who were in high school already had friendships formed from, when they were little, and I joined in 10th grade, it was easier to actually speak to and integrate with other Japanese students, because their parents had been transferred here to the US and were only staying here for a few years. So their experience was in a way similar to mine, even though they came from Japan and I came from Germany. So again, there was a lot of even more. So now there was a lot of Japanese culture around me. It felt like, even though I was in the US. And I think my parents' influence continued on this path of, what am I supposed to do? What should I do? Rather than following my heart, because I was still living with them. So in terms of what college I could go to, my mother had strict rules in terms of what colleges could I apply to and even consider. And even after college, there was an expectation that I would have a successful job. So I needed to pick a career that was successful and that would make them proud. So if they talk to other people, they could say, my daughter is going to the university, she's graduating, my daughter has this type of job and role, it's prestigious. And so everything was geared towards that, rather than, what's authentically me, what do I really want to do?
Fully resonate.
Yeah. So that's why I ended up in a corporate career that's so different from what I'm doing now, because I followed what I thought I was supposed to do and what I've been told to do in order to be, quote unquote, successful.
Yes. So it's like you're also sharing the same overachievers syndrome as I have. Yes. Too. Oh my gosh. Yeah.
Absolutely. And as you know, what happens is that, you continue in that and you stay in that long enough, something, I think, inside you, right, realizes that something is not right, that is not your path. And that started to happen for me, even though on the outside, things looked great. I kept on getting promoted and it looked like a successful career. On the inside, I was feeling utterly unhappy. And I couldn't figure out, because again, this was supposed to be the path to success, right? Why wasn't I feeling happy then and proud of what I had accomplished? And I think that voice became louder and louder until I really listened and said, what's more important? Is it that outward success and making other people happy, or is it making myself happy?
How long did it last? I mean, that increasing volume of that voice.
Yeah, I had worked in the corporate world by then for 12 years.
Okay.
Yes. So that was a long time, 12 years that I stuck with it. And yeah, that's when the point when I decided, my own happiness is more important and I have to figure this out. Mm-hmm. And, it's not like I hadn't been trying to figure it out throughout the 12 years, but I think work, how it is, work gets busy. You don't know, right? I mean, I'm trying this, I'm trying that, but nothing tells me the answer of what am I really supposed to be doing. So what do? You continue on your path that you're already on and get stuck in that way.
I can so resonate with you on this level, because that's exactly what really happened on my path. And I had to, so I'm looking back, I'm kind of glad that, the hearing loss kicked in as a special episode, so that eventually really stopped me from continue pushing and trying to make it work, but really having that full stop, right? And I want to know, at what point in that transition, okay, you're deeply unhappy and you want to make something different. And where is that stopping point? There's a fine line about no, today is the time I gotta leave.
Yeah. So I had been journaling in the mornings. Yeah. And, just kind of writing morning pages, so to speak. The Artist's Way really inspired me to do that. And I was writing, I'm so unhappy, but I don't know what else I want to do. Maybe there will be another reorganization soon and things will change. And I happened to look back at some notes that I had written down in my morning pages 6 years before then. And I was shocked to find out I had been almost writing the exact same thing 6 years before. I'm so unhappy, but I feel stuck. What else could I be doing? Oh, maybe there's another reorganization, because reorganizations happen in that company every year. And I thought, oh my goodness, how long have I been sitting here feeling unhappy? And what's going to happen if I don't make a change? Am I going to be sitting here 6 years from now, writing the same thing? And that's when I thought, I cannot let that happen. That's ridiculous, right? And sort of opened my eyes to, if it's day by day, you don't really notice what's happening, but just seeing that contrast from, 6 years ago, it's exactly the same thing, right? To now, right? 6 years later.
It's really synchronistic. I think it's really synchronistic. Like, it did not happen to see that same way of journaling like 6 years ago till exactly that point. So I think everything has that timing, the time when you are supposed to really see that and like getting that aha moment and say, now is the time to do something about it.
Mm-hmm. Yes. And I think other things at work were happening too that kind of, contributed. There was another reorg. I was put under another manager, and I had this feeling there's something about this really just not right. I don't want to be here. So, there were other factors that were then confirming that feeling. But I really had to go through a sort of big internal change too, to be able to let go of the corporate world and the corporate life and everything I had worked so hard for. Because that was part of my ego, I think, that was sort of still holding on, right? Like the title I had worked so hard for. I made a good salary, all this experience I had gained in that field. I was basically saying, it doesn't matter, right? I'm willing to let that go. So I had to really work on myself to be able to do that.
Like, I so feel you. It's like almost like having a rerun of my life too while I'm talking to you. So interesting. Okay, so now you're like, okay, it's time to make a shift. Mm-hmm. And in that period of making a shift, because I know your expertise is all about learning how to balance between two inner forces. One is like, the inner saboteurs, our inner critics, how harshly we could talk to ourselves, right? And the other part is, unless this part is getting quieter and quieter and quieter, then we don't get to really connect with this part of us, which is the truer, that you call it a champion. I call it this inner wisdom, right? We wouldn't be able to connect with this part of ourselves. And I'm curious, so at that specific time of your change, right? You're making a shift, I'm going somewhere else, even though I'm not exactly perfectly sure where that will land. What are those prominent inner voices in you? Do you want to share a little bit?
Yes. No, that's a really good point. Luckily, I had already done some work on my saboteurs. I became aware of them maybe kind of early in my career, actually. I was reading a book, and sort of, as I was reading, it wrote about the inner critic and, what we're telling ourselves. And I was shocked to learn how I was talking to myself. It's the first time it came to my awareness that, I was talking to myself really critically and very judgmentally. And so that piece I had been working on along the time. So luckily, by that time when I was leaving, I was no longer talking to myself in this judgmental and critical voice. That being said, the saboteurs were still there, and they were that ego that I described, right? They were the ones who were saying like, but what about your title? How can you get that up? What about your nice salary? How are you going to make a living?
Yeah.
What about the whole career you had been working so hard for? Are you just throwing that away, right? So those were all saboteur voices. But equally, I had developed, I think, enough of a champion voice that was saying, well, what's more important, right? Are you going to be unhappy for the rest of your life? Is your happiness not more important than those things? And, I think at that point, my champion was strong enough to convince me that my own happiness was indeed more important. And I no longer wanted to be unhappy and be guided by my saboteurs and let them win out.
I am amazed by your share because I see how each of us, we are having our own healing journey, right? And for me, my career path in the corporate world, it didn't really provide me with the tools of, telling apart the different voices, so it's all like kind of like all entangled in my head. I didn't know what to do anything about it. But like yours is like, you already sort of like self-aware, like a very self-aware in terms of these two forces, and you were able to navigate yourself out of that when the time is right. And mine was more like a chaotic moment, like, oh shoot, I can't hear anything, so what do I do now? And start picking things up about, oh wow, so I have been quite critical about myself for all my life.
Yes.
And this healing journey is so needed to be shared in the world, I feel, because it's internal. It's not out, like no one knows it. No one sees what you're going through. You can seem very happy, but deep down, you're the opposite.
Yes.
Right? And I would love for you to share a little bit more about like, then when you are working with beloveds, because my honor to work with the beloved that we are co-nurturing together, and because we share the same ideology and also philosophy about these two inner forces, right? I'd love to have you share a little bit more about like, how do you guide people or professionals when they are so deeply entrenched in the saboteurs, the talk that they look at as their reality, and when you are teaching them how to listen to their other, the champion voice, do they have any rejection toward that?
Yes, no, excellent question. So the first part is really to even call them out and become aware that they are saboteur voices. Because as you just described in the beginning, it's just voices, right? Feelings. They don't announce themselves. They're not saying like, hello, I'm your saboteur and I'm saying this part, right? It's just a voice that we hear, or a thought that we have, or feeling that we have. And we just sort of think it's the truth, right? So the first step is really to identify the saboteurs. And there is actually even a saboteur assessment that I do with many of my clients based on Shirzad Charmaine's work on positive intelligence. And it identifies who your saboteurs are.
Yeah.
So that can be a great first step to identify, right? Okay, who are my top saboteurs and what do they say? So we can create this awareness and we can say, okay, that thought, that's a saboteur thought, it's the saboteur. And that feeling, it's coming from this other saboteur. It's the perfectionist saboteur, for example, right? That's saying this part. It's the hyperachiever saboteur who's saying this other part. And that becomes the first step, right? So now we can distinguish and we can catch that voice at least and say, oh, this is saboteur versus this is champion. And then the work becomes, how do we amplify the voice of the champion, right? Because what happens by nature is the saboteur, because it's based on fear, it's so strong, right? We all have this, I don't know, innate instinct to, walk towards or listen to things that are more based on fear rather than anything else. So training ourselves, how do we listen to this other voice? How do I hear my champion more? How do I bring that voice out more? And sort of, it becomes the balance, right? So it's more and more that the champion winning out and guiding us. But that takes practice. It's not a quick, from today to
it doesn't happen overnight, right? It doesn't happen overnight. And as much as like, I would love to buy something like a little, potion or something to drink it right away and say, oh yeah, I'm healed, right? No, it doesn't happen this way. And what you're sharing is so important because it takes trust. It takes trust. It takes faith too, to really work it through, and knowing that even though you don't feel the change yet, it's happening in the back scene already.
Yes.
Right. And the next time when you're in a same situation, you see yourself react or respond in a different way. That means that all the work they've done, it was not wasteful. So we need triggers. I was just talking to another friend how important triggers are, even though we don't like it, So we get triggered in the similar situation. We see ourselves at least like respond a little bit differently than the previous version of how we would love to do it.
Yes, that's very true. It's a good way to look at growth, right? If we didn't have the triggers, we wouldn't know how far we had come.
No, not at all. Wow. Okay. So also I wanted, something interesting came up is that I know we talk about it we both share this quality of being an introvert, and also a highly sensitive HSP, right?
Mm-hmm.
How do you suggest, okay, or because you've been doing all these inner work throughout the years, I'm sure you learn a lot about how to really hone in of your sensitivity. How do you survive? Not just use the word survive, thrive. Okay, let's change to the word thrive. How do we thrive without sensitivity in today's corporate world? Because I'm sure a lot of professional clients you're working with, they're still in the corporate world, you know? And when you have to speak up for yourself, for your opinions, yeah, you're feeling so much because we're being judged or being mistakenly thinking like, oh, you're too shy, you're too sensitive, you're too quiet, you're too calculating. There's something that I heard from the other person. You're too calculating, you're too mysterious, you don't share anything. How do you suggest, or what do you guide people through that kind of type of process to connect with their sensitivity, honing as a gift in intensity?
No, it's really interesting because that you bring up this topic. I just taught a workshop around the topic of introverts, called Introvert Power, right? Because so often we see introvertedness as something that is a weakness rather than a strength, especially in the Western world. I think the workplace is geared more towards extroverts, and there's almost this extrovert ideal, right, of someone who speaks up, someone who is very self-assured, someone who is, great at networking with lots of people. And as an introvert, and as a sensitive person, it can often feel like, well, I'm not like that. I have to try, right, and be that so I can be successful. But that brings us back to the topic of authenticity. That's not being authentic, right? That's forcing ourselves to be someone who we are not.
Exactly.
And as an introvert myself, I saw that often, right? So often do you see leaders, managers, higher ups having this more extroverted style. Right. And, I remember myself feeling like, okay, I'm not like that, right? I have to be more like that. But the truth is that actually introverts have great strengths. They're great strengths of, we're great listeners. We can kind of go and think about something very thoughtfully and then come up with ideas or solutions or proposals that are very well thought out. We have the ability to form connections with others, and we can, especially one-on-one or in smaller groups, and those are all great strengths that we can build on in order to be great leaders, in order to be just great individual contributors in the workplace. But it might just look very different from the way that an extrovert would do it. So rather than forcing myself to be very outspoken, how can I still get my point across in a maybe more quiet way? Is there written communication that I can rely on? Are there smaller one-on-one meetings and discussions that I can have with people to share my ideas? Can I align myself with an ally who maybe is more outspoken, and maybe we can implement a change that we both believe in?
Yeah.
So it's all about finding the right strategies that suit our natural strengths and that allow us to be authentic, right?
I love it. Okay, so one thing is also that knowing the difference that there is no right way to do this. Being an extrovert, being an introvert, there is no, which one is more higher up than the other. But being an extrovert is basically when you are with people, you feel a lot more energized, right? That's how you refuel your energy. And but for us, the introverts, we feel much more nourished when we have just, quiet space and solitude, when we spend less time with mingling with other energies, right? And then we come up again, right? So there's no specific ways of how this one's better than the other. But of course, the mainstream promotes the idea of you need to look like this, getting out there and be confident in that dynamic, whatever way. But I'm so happy that you share this part that I'm sure a lot of introverts love to hear, that there's nothing wrong with them. Not at all.
Absolutely not. And you're bringing up another good point. because of the difference that the energy being around so many other people actually drains us more as introverts, it becomes even more important that we put in place practices to manage our energy, right? In order to be successful, we need to be very proactive about that. And again, unfortunately, the workplace more and more is favoring extroverts. I mean, I hear, people now not even having their own cubicle and maybe are in open office space where, right, there's no privacy and time to retreat, for example. So you need to build in time and space for yourself to re-energize. So that means being very proactive about scheduling breaks, stepping away from your desk, finding right places where you can be by yourself and recharge, for example. And even with meetings, right, just becoming really conscious of, what meetings drain you, and then scheduling time to refuel you after those meetings. You just have to, right, you have to build that in for yourself, because unfortunately the workplace doesn't give that to you automatically.
I so wish that people talk more in the corporate world about how do we protect our energies, or, be energetic, because we all are energies, we're with me suit, we're walking me suit here. But again, like with energetic boundaries, I mean, because we don't talk about it in the corporate world at all. And then we mingled, with so many meetings, endless meetings, and you end up very, very drained, depleted at the end of the day. And yes. You wonder why, right? And yeah, like you said, carving out time to really do that self-care is actually unavoidable. I think it's unavoidable.
It's essential.
It's essential. It's essential.
Yes, it absolutely is, right? And no one teaches us that. And the other piece about those breaks is oftentimes we don't give ourselves the break until we feel tired, right? We're like powering through, like, I need to do this, I need to get this done. And at the very end, we're exhausted and we're like, okay, now I need to just, I need to rest. But by then it's almost too late, right? We've already depleted all of our energy. So the proactiveness comes from, how do I build in regular breaks and regular times to refuel before I hit that point, so we don't feel constantly drained.
So good. I feel like, the past gen, will be so happy to receive this kind of wisdom, but it's already back.
Well, my former self too, right? Everything, right, is what I wish I had heard too, as my former self, which I didn't know back then in the workplace either. Most of these things, yeah.
Okay, so I think the one last question is what comes through right now is how do we weave in or welcome more, or actually generate, let's use the word self-generate, more happiness in order to, at the same time, being authentic. Because I don't want people to have the misunderstanding of you need to be super happy all the time, and this is the authentic version of you, of who you are, always being happy, because we're going through our ups and downs.
Absolutely. So the focus is not so much, right, on like, oh, I have to be happy,
Right.
But the focus is to focus on those factors that contribute towards happiness. And so there are two pieces in my mind. There's something about our thoughts, right? Like, how do we manage our thoughts in a way to maximize happiness? And then about our actions, the things we actually do that maximize happiness. So in terms of our thoughts, the more kind of internal work is exactly the work you mentioned around the saboteurs and champions, right? How can I bring out and listen to my champion more and more to cultivate happiness? And the simple practices. I love this practice of acknowledgements, for example, where you acknowledge yourself, right? Give yourself credit for things that you did that day, that week, and just practice that on a regular basis, because those are positives, right? The saboteur would think about all the things you didn't get done, right? And just kind of thinks about to-do lists. The champion would say, look at and celebrate. Let's acknowledge all the things that you did get done and focus on the positive. So that's one way, right, to cultivate the happiness on the thought side. On the action side, what we actually do, there is some research by Tal Ben-Shahar, he's a professor at Harvard who teaches the most popular course at Harvard, which is a course on happiness. Exactly. And he has found that there are three important pillars that need to be in place for our work to feel really fulfilling, feel like something we're meant to do. And that's working with our strengths, using our signature strengths on a regular basis, doing activities that we enjoy doing, and doing things that are meaningful to us, that give us a sense of purpose. Right? And it's really the intersection between those three, right? We're using our strengths and doing what we're best at. We doing things we enjoy doing, and we do things that give us a sense of meaning and purpose. Right? That really drives our happiness. So, right, rather than thinking I need to be happy, just focus on that. What are my core strengths? Do I get to use them? If not, how can I use them more? What do I enjoy doing? Do I get to do that? If not, how can I do that more? And what do I find deeply meaningful? And am I doing those things? And if not, how can I bring more of that into my life?
This is truly wise. I love it because it gets a check-in point rather than say, I'm just focused on how to be happy. I'm not happy. What do I do? Right? But not being victimized by that idea of have to be happy all the time, but really have a check-in point of, am I using my strength right now, the core strength right now? Am I doing whatever I'm enjoying to do? Does it serve me with a purpose? So it fulfills my heart, right? Yeah. Thank you for this. This is really, really beautiful. This is really beautiful. I think there's something I want to come through still. Sorry, like I didn't know that I was so
that's totally fine. Yeah.
It's about when we are being triggered, heavily triggered, right? And then again, going back to those two forces, being heavily triggered, and when the voice of the inner saboteur gets so loud, it's almost like going out of control, right? Then how do you really gear yourself back step by step to that other force of champion? And really hearing it and affirming it? Like, where is that transition? How do you transition that time when you're being like, woo, very triggered?
I think a key point is actually you need to bring yourself back to your body.
Good.
When there's only so much you can do in your head, right? And your thoughts otherwise will be racing, and you're trying to, fight out between your saboteur and champion. You need something to bring you back to your body. And there are various ways to do it, right? There are simple ways of literally even just kind of rubbing your fingertips together, right? For smaller things. Breathing, right? Taking a deep breath to really feel the breath in your body. And, I would even go, and suggest other things. Some people, right, they physically like to exercise, right, to get into the body. Anything I think that can get you out of your mind and stop that for a moment and get you back in your body will help to make that transition back to your champion. And, again, with your champion, there might be, different ways that you can access. You want to basically access self-acceptance, self-compassion, those kind of elements, right, for yourself. And what's a way, for you to access that? It might really help to talk to someone, of course, right, who has these energies of acceptance and compassion, to really, really feel that. But anything that gets you into that energy, I think, will bring up the voice of the champion again. So beautiful. I love that. And then thank you for wrapping this up. I feel like we're in the Aquarius age, as you know, our age, right? And it's so important to learn how to hear our heart much more than the head, right? This is like, I hope the elementary school system will just incorporate that one day, because they don't have to hit into that healing journey as hard as we did. And then also just by learning to tap into a heart, the intuition itself works for us, right? And I'd like to just say thank you so much for sharing all your beautiful wisdom. And you are a woman of both intelligence and intuitive. And I can't wait to see how it's going to unfold for you. The people who are drawn to the two inner forces wisdom that you're providing. So how do people find you now? So easiest way might be just to go to my website, which is pauercoaching.com. That's Pauer, my last name, coaching.com.
Power as well, powerful as well. Okay.
Yes, powerful as well, but it's just a different spelling.
Yeah.
Yes, I'm, from there, I think it's easiest to contact me if you'd like, but also get more information, and I have blog posts there as well that you can read through.
Oh, so grateful of you, Manuela. You're such a gem. You're such a gem in this world. And we need you to spread more wisdom in terms of managing the head to heart. This is a pathway to authenticity. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Jen. Thank you. I really enjoyed this. I know you are a like-minded, beautiful soul on a similar path. So I'm so glad that we're journeying this path together.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. So everyone, this is a beautiful Manuela Pauer, Pauer, but powerful as well. And feel free to connect with her if you're interested in knowing more about what she does in terms of the two inner forces that we've been talking about in this conversation, but much more to connect with her and know much more of her sacred work. All right, everyone, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye.